just want to do God's will.
What you're seeking is a blessing from God.
You must expect a miracle.
You have the power of choice.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Life Today Live. It is Monday, and this morning the Supreme Court released decisions on 3 cases, but Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which is the case that looks like it will overturn Roe versus Wade, was not one of the decisions. So we wait at least another week. They're saying they're going to rule by the end of the month or early July, but everything's still pointing towards Roe versus Wade being overturned. The implications are obviously big, but not what everybody's telling you they are. So we're going to get into that, explain maybe what that would mean, what we can do about it on the pro-life side, and some of the other things we need to be aware of and concerned about when we're talking about this, what I consider a holocaust of abortion. My guest today is a repeat guest, Herbie Newell. He is the president of Lifeline Children's Services, based out of Birmingham, Alabama. Just a great member of the team, doing great work, and so I enjoyed talking to him, hearing about kind of what's going on. So we invite you to be a part of the conversation. Chat is open if you're on a chat-enabled channel watching live. If you're watching in the replay, we always appreciate that too. Herbie, welcome back to Life Today Live. Good to see you, man.
Randy, is great, and so many important topics that we can talk about, but ultimately always grateful for you and for your audience.
I want to ask you about one thing before we get into the abortion issue, because the other sort of big global event, impacts children, obviously, and anybody working with children. I know we've got a life center. We've got some operations partner over in Ukraine, and we've been getting some footage here that is heartbreaking. Fortunately, our operations are very far west, and so there have been some things close by, but we're still good. What about you guys? What are you guys doing over in Ukraine?
Yeah, so a lot of the partners that we had and kind of the base of operations was in Kyiv, and then actually in the east and southeast. And so a lot of the work we've done over the last several years actually has been even in Zaporizhzhia, Ukraine. And for those who were watching the news when the Russian invasion first occurred back in February and March, if they remember the largest nuclear reactor that was overtaken by Russia, that's actually in Zaporizhzhia. And one of the homes that we've worked at for several years, and some of the base of operations we've had was only about 9 miles from that nuclear reactor.
Jeez. And
so it just supporting our partners, helping those get out that need to get out, supporting those who have stayed, to try to help what's going on. But I think just to highlight maybe a bright spot is there was one little girl actually in Zaporizhzhia who we have been working since the very beginning of March to get extradited out of Ukraine, severe special needs. Really, some of the surgery she needed couldn't be performed in Ukraine in a post-invasion world, and she needed the Western medication and medicine and surgery. By God's grace and goodness, we were able to get her out last week and into Poland. And she had all of her adoption papers, so she's actually going to be adopted into a family. And Lord willing, that family can take her home this week from Poland. And so she'll have those surgeries that she needs. So even in the midst of war and conflict, we're still seeing the Lord work miracles and make a way where there seems to be no way. Yeah,
the whole situation has kind of faded a little bit from the headlines. We're not seeing it every time we turn on the TV, but it's still a mess. There's so many displaced people. You guys operating in all over Eastern Europe as to the border countries like Hungary, Poland, Romania. You guys throughout that area? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we actually have operations in both Poland and Romania. And our team in Romania, I mean, again, by God's grace, they had just seen their center actually not empty, but they were doing some clearing out, and we're in a perfect position to receive both children, women, and families from Ukraine once the conflict started. And so we've been able to get a lot of kids and families into that center. And then we've been working with one of our partners in Bucharest, who has actually been helping extradite orphanages, especially in the harder to hit areas, down into Romania. And then we've had our team going back and forth to the Poland-Ukraine border to really help folks there as well. So yeah, it's not out of it is out of the viewing public's eye, because we're not talking about it on the 24-hour news cycles as much right now, and we're more obviously concerned about inflation and the rising fuel prices. But these are issues that are continuing to go on, conflict that is continuing to affect real people, real children, and even more than that, Randy, there are things that are happening today that are going to last decades to really undo and to bring healing and help to many families that have been affected.
You, I'm sorry, I was reading some of the chat here. What was I going to say? Oh, so one of the criticisms of the pro-life people that are pro-life, and it's a false thing. It's just not true. Historically, you can just lay out all huge case is that once children are born, we don't care about them, right? But give people just a brief overview of everything that your organization does, because this is a perfect example of what Christians have been doing for centuries, literally, and helping to take care of vulnerable children. And just for people that don't know what Lifeline does, give us the quick synopsis.
Yeah, and even just as a synopsis or a segue from Ukraine, even to this topic, when the conflict in Ukraine started, I mean, our phone literally was ringing off the hooks of Christians, believers who wanted to do something, and not just for the orphan and not just for kids, but for families and for the Ukrainian people. For millennium, Christians have been helping, because we've been helped so much by the gospel of Christ Jesus. We've been helping the most vulnerable. We've been driven by God's grace to respond to crisis and to anything where we see the image bearers of God being hurt, being in trouble. And it's even fantastic and overwhelming to see the amount of support that came into our organization, both to our partners in Romania and in Ukraine and in Poland, even amidst this Ukrainian conflict. That just goes back to what we see with Roe v. Wade and the overturning of Roe v. Wade, Lord willing, here in our own country. A lot of times I'm asked by legislatures in various states, or even with senators and congressmen on a federal level, are people going to adopt? Are people going to foster? Are real people going to stand in the gap if Roe v. Wade is actually overturned? And unresoundingly, I have been able to say yes, because through the ministry of Lifeline, we help families through adoption. We've had a maternity service ministry for 41 years where we're helping women choose life and discipling her through her pregnancy and walking her through her pregnancy. Whether she choose parenting or adoption, we want to see her choose life. We've seen churches, we've seen believers, we've seen so many people that have signed up to walk alongside life with a woman that's going through a pregnancy. We've seen so many people that have signed up to adopt, or our foster care program. We go into churches and we ask if families are willing to care for children through foster care. And we have tons of people that are always willing and able to say, yes, I want to be available and I want to help. We have counseling and education. We have our orphan care ministry. We have our family restoration ministry. And a lot of times, Randy, to be honest, we're more at loss to make sure that we're utilizing the volunteers more than we are trying to look for volunteers. When God's people hear the call of God's command to go and care for the vulnerable, and they can be connected to those real needs, then that is always something that they're ready, willing, and able to do. And so I think God's people are ready for Roe v. Wade to be overturned. And I think they're going to come out in droves to support those women and those children who ultimately will need our support in a big way.
Yeah, as long as the government stays out of our way, we'll continue helping, women, children, adoptions, foster services, all the things that we need to do. The church really has been, not perfect. We can find incidents of things not right, but overall, the church has been the example of how to care for the poor, the needy, the widowed, the orphans. And we'll keep doing it. It's interesting. I had this conversation with one of my kids recently, and they said, really? is it, has the church, and I was like, look at all the adoption services, and the hospitals now have become big business, and so they've somewhat secularized. But you look at where they're founded. I mean, it's Catholic, it's Baptist, it's Methodist, it's Presbyterian. I mean, this is because this is the work of the church, was to help people. And so we're still going to do it. So if there's any question out there, if any Christians are wondering, are Christians doing it? Absolutely. And you can be involved. Lifeline's a great place if you want to plug in and do something. But at the same time, we're not going to shut up about abortion, because it's really, really awful what has gone on in this country. And the science, the medicine has just given us an even clearer picture of what goes on in the womb. And some of the rhetoric is just weird, forced birthing. You want to force people to birth. It's like, we're not forcing these things. This is what happens when you get pregnant. We're saying it's a life. It's a life in there. What do you think, Herbie, about Roe versus Wade? I mean, because we didn't get a ruling this morning. This is kind of dragging out a bit, and I guess the court's saying, hey, we're not going to be intimidated by a leak. We're not going to have our hand forced. Are you still, optimistic that it will be overturned?
Yeah, Randy, I'm prayerfully optimistic, as I have been, and I actually had the opportunity to be on the steps of the Supreme Court listening to the oral arguments. Many of us couldn't get inside of the court because of COVID, but we were able to listen outside of the court, be present. And I've been prayerfully optimistic really since December 1st, when oral arguments were heard, that we were going to get a decision that was going to be a decision that we've been praying for. I'm still hopefully optimistic. I think if their leaked decision had not have come out the 1st of May, we were always kind of expecting that this decision would come out as probably one of the last decisions of the term that ends in June. And so many of us were already kind of highlighting that last week of June as the week that we would get the decision. Obviously, the leaked opinion just brought the hysteria to a different level on both sides. And I think it's wise, and I'm sure that Chief Justice Roberts, who has been very much firm that he does not appreciate the leak, that he's going to find out how that leak was made, and he's going to rectify that situation. I think he's very resolute that the court will not be intimidated, the court will not be bullied, and that they will continue to go about business as they always have. And honestly, that actually gives me more hope that the decision is being thought through, and that this decision really might be the one that we saw at the beginning of May, or something very similar to it. I think, what I've heard from people who know far more about the Supreme Court than I do is that pretty much the votes that were going to swing one way or the other were going to be the Chief Justice, as well as Brett Kavanaugh. And from people that know Justice Kavanaugh a whole lot better than I do, and kind of know his posture and have been around him, I think having people outside of his home picketing and rioting is not going to change his mind. As a matter of fact, I think that's going to make him a lot more resolute. We know that the other four are pretty resolute, and you can even tell in oral arguments that this is where they were going. And so I think we just really need to continue to pray for both Justice Kavanaugh and the Chief Justice, Justice Roberts. But what I've also told people is we need to be praying for the entire court. We need to be praying for Justice Sotomayor and Justice Breyer and Justice Kagan, that maybe even during this time that the Lord would change their heart, or help them to see the wisdom of what that leaked opinion. And I really don't care if you're pro-life or if you're pro-abortion. The truth of the matter is this always should have been a legislative issue. It should have never been a created judicial right. And we need it to go back to the legislature. And I think it's even funny when the pro-abortion lobby is complaining and taking legislation even to the highest legislature in the Congress, and complaining that they have to do so. That's where it should have been in the very beginning. It should have been in our states, and it should have been in the Congress, and it should have been in the legislature, not a judicial created right.
I actually I'm not. I mean, I know it's a big step, overturning Roe versus Wade. I don't deny that, but at the same time, it kind of creates 50 new problems, because it doesn't overturn abortion. It sends abortion back to the states, and we know. I mean, California's already saying, "Hey, yeah, we're going to pay to fly people from all over the country here just to have abortions," and it's like, does this really solve the problem? What do you see? Assuming the court does overturn it, what do you see after that?
I think the positive thing we have to look at first is you have 24 states that are going to have trigger laws where abortion is going to be extremely limited from where it is today with Roe versus Wade, or it's going to be completely eliminated. Now, certainly, I'm not naive enough to think that that means that even in the home state where I live in Alabama, that means that women that live in Alabama aren't going to travel out of state or even do a Planned Parenthood web call and get a prescription of the abortion pill. But what it does is it at least limits the access to a legalized killing of a baby inside of the womb. And I think that's something that we can praise. I think the other thing is this brings the fight for life back on a local level. It brings it back to a human interaction. I think the pro-life movement, I think our gospel that we preach of Jesus being the way, the truth, and the life, I think our worldview from a biblical stance of knowing that all life is precious because it's made in the image of God, that's always much better conveyed on a face-to-face relational level. Yeah. And so, yes, it does bring extreme laws like what we see in both California and New York and Massachusetts and Illinois and other states, but it also brings it back to the human level. And I've always thought that this life issue is best done in relationships, not best fought on a national stage. And so I pray that the church would be ready to be open arms and to love on those women and to love on those children in their sphere of influence. Certainly, we can't believe that abortion, as you said, will be ended. It's actually going to become much more barbaric in those states we've mentioned, like New York and Massachusetts and California. But it also means that we know how to target life-saving mechanisms to those states. It knows how we can organize. And so, yes, it brings some complexity, but I also think it brings some organization and it brings some more structured prayer for us to be praying for lives and to be praying for the people of these states.
You used the term barbaric. What do you mean by that?
Well, I know recently, even hearing of the process of a medical abortion, even though I know what it is, we've listened to a lot of different podcasts and a lot of different doctors even describing the procedure of abortion, and it's just barbaric. Without getting into gruesome details, maybe making a little bit more hopeful, had the opportunity to actually interview the lady who authored the bill in Mississippi that brought a 15-week abortion ban. And she actually wrote that bill in 2018, the bill that we're waiting for the decision right now from the Supreme Court. Her name is Becky Curry. And I didn't know a lot about Becky before I interviewed her, but as I was interviewing her, she shared with me that she actually was a single parent, had a son, and had to find a way to take care of him. She was pressured into abortion, but she resisted that pressure, and her son was born. But one of the things she realized she had to do is to support her son. And so she became a registered nurse, an RN, and she was really hoping to get on the ER floor to be able to help with the most trauma needs in the hospital. But instead, they put her on the labor and delivery floor. And she said that within the first week of working in labor delivery, a mom came in. They thought she was having a miscarriage. The baby was 15 weeks. And she said that baby was born, and they had instantly called the morgue. And instead, she looked down and she showed the doctor that the baby's heart was still beating. Outside of the mama's womb, disconnected from the mama, the baby's heart was still beating. And so they, even back in the 70s, put support around that child. And I don't remember the exact time frame, but more than 24 hours, that baby's heart continued to beat. And she said from that moment on, she knew if she ever had the opportunity to write legislation or to write a law that would protect babies like the one that was born her first week as an RN, she would do it. When you take a life like that baby whose heart is beating, we know the heart starts beating around 6 to 8 weeks of gestation, and you stop a beating heart by reaching in and ripping a child out of its mother's womb, that is barbaric. And that is not what a civilized society can do. And now we can try to use all kind of sweet words, women's health care, a woman's right to choose, a woman's body. We can try to use all the type of terms and colloquialisms we want. But abortion is nothing more than a barbaric practice that ends a beating heart and it ends a life. And I love what my friend Karen Purvis used to say. She's gone to be with the Lord, but she say, I love it when science finally catches up with God. Yeah. And we have the technology right now to be able to look into the womb and to see that even at conception, that is a life, that is a life that is starting to take on the form of a baby, and that is starting to have a heart that beats and a brain that goes and lungs that function. And we need to protect the most vulnerable.
I hear every time I have this topic, I get later chat and comments saying, you guys, the vast number of abortions occur, in the first few days or few weeks. Nobody does late-term abortions. Nobody does third trimester or second, hardly ever, only if it's an emergency. What's the truth out there?
Yeah, well, and I think what you'll also hear is you'll hear folks say that a lot of the late-term abortions are babies where we're looking into the womb and we're noticing they have some type of severe chromosomal defect, or maybe that's a child that won't live long outside the womb, even if brought to full term. And you're going to hear those arguments as well. I think the first thing we need to do as pro-life people is have compassion upon women that are going through real life difficulties, on families that are going through real life difficulties. I think we need to wrap around them with love and support. But I think we need to be very careful, because right now into today's society, we have defined love as agreeing to whatever someone wants to do. Love is not giving in to what someone thinks is best. Love is pursuing what's best for both a mom and for a child. And so, yes, certainly we see a lot of abortions that are going to happen before that 15-week ban in Mississippi. We're going to see abortions that are going to happen even before the 6 to 8 weeks of the heartbeat bill that happened in Texas that was supported by the Supreme Court. But it doesn't stop the fact that we don't need to be giving in to abortion. Instead, we need to be wrapping around women. The number one reason people will give you that women do have abortion, even in the first trimester, is because of poverty or the lack of support. Well, I would just say that the greatest poverty that most women have is not always monetary policy or poverty, it's relational poverty. And so I believe as pro-life people, we need to be reaching out to these women when they're trying to make these decisions, helping them know that we're going to be there for them. The truth of the matter is, we know scientifically that the moment a woman becomes pregnant, that her hormone levels begin to change. As a matter of fact, chemical abortion is nothing more than feeding a woman with different types of hormones that'll make her have a miscarriage. Hormones begin immediately at conception, and those hormones create a desire in a woman to be a mother. That motherly instinct comes in them. That motherly desire comes in them. I believe scientifically, of course I believe biblically, but I believe even scientifically, that we are diverting the desires of a woman by giving the ability for her to have an abortion. That's contrary to the natural desires, even the scientific desires that she has. And instead, we need to become and support those women and care for those women and show them that there is a way to bring life to their child.
Yeah, I know that, like you, I've talked to a lot of women who have had abortions, and if you're one of those, we're not here to condemn you at all. And in fact, organizations like Herbie's are very interested in helping you. And I think it was Sean Carney that said, unless it was you, the last time I talked to you, so said, why would you want to take the trauma that a woman is going through with an unplanned, unwanted pregnancy and add the trauma of abortion, which lasts far more than the 9 months. It lasts a lifetime. You're trying to solve trauma with trauma, and really you're just compounding it. And so, I like your attitude and Sean's and really everybody I know in the pro-life movement, which is to care for the women and to really focus on that and not just say abortion's wrong, but say we can do better in these areas. And so I very much appreciate that about what you do. I want to, if I can, real quick, I want to show people your website. This is Lifeline Children's Services. The URL is lifelinechild.org. And, I love the tagline there about bringing gospel hope to vulnerable children, because I do truly believe that we have to approach this thing both with care and with the gospel, because it is the hope. Even for those who have had an abortion, there is hope in the gospel. For those who are contemplating it, there is hope in the gospel. For those who have given up children to, for adoption, that can leave a hole. I know I was adopted, and my biological mother that I met when I was 25 has told me that, just seeing you and my family, my children really just filled a void in her life. So these are, we're talking about not just issues, we're talking about people. And really Herbie's approach is the approach. I want to spotlight something that you guys are doing because I think this kind of speaks to that. And you mentioned to me before we started that your children are involved in helping others in a way that I think is really cool. Talk about what people can do right now to help women who are in those tough situations.
Yeah, so actually in 2016, my wife and my 3 kids went out to the park to do a lemonade stand, and their whole idea was they wanted to raise money for vulnerable women and vulnerable children that were being helped by Lifeline. And so they went into a dog park. I think that day, that hot day in June, they raised about $20 for orphans. But what happened that night was the kids started to think, and they started to brainstorm with my wife, Ashley, and I, and they said, but what if all the kids that Lifeline reached, all the kids that have been adopted, all the families, what if they all did lemonade stands? What if there were 1,000 of those stands, Dad? I mean, that could be $20,000 that could go help women and children. And so they said, we want kids to take a stand. And from there, we started a campaign called Stand for Orphans. It's really a 365-day campaign, but we really highlight it in the summer. And it's where kids can use their talents, their abilities, their ingenuity to find a way to raise money for orphan and vulnerable women to be able to help them. And so my daughter, for instance, has made bracelets this summer that she's selling, and she's made hundreds of dollars already. And so she's using that talent and that craftiness and that gift, and she's selling them at lemonade stands or at bake sales or at other places. A lot of kids have done bake sales or lemonade stands. A lot of churches have done it for their VBSs or their church mission project with their kids. But it's a way to help kids use their skills, their abilities, their time, and their talents to do something that's bigger than themselves. And if my wife was here, she would say she's a big proponent in helping kids at a very early age learn to do something radically good for people outside of themselves, like to really just to be missional at a young age. And it goes back to even what you were saying before this question. So many women who go into the abortion clinic, they go to the abortion clinic because they're looking for help. And the abortion clinic wants to say they're pro women, but they really don't do anything but take a child from them. They don't bring an extra level of support. They're not helping them get back on their feet. They're not helping them with education. They're not helping them make better choices. They're just simply taking away their child. But with the church, from our young children that are taking a stand for orphans all the way to our senior adults, there's something that we're doing passionately when we wrap around that single mom, when we wrap around that pregnant mom. We're giving her support, we're giving her love, and we're giving her a community. And that's what will help people survive. And so if we can teach that at an early age to kids to help them to take a stand, then I truly believe that we won't end abortion because we changed laws. We'll end abortion because we changed hearts.
Yeah, and that is key. And I appreciate you saying that. Someone in the chat had just raised that concern. And you're right. We can change the laws, but we really have to change the hearts. And I'm in favor of changing both, by the way. I think
me too.
I think it's a two-pronged approach. All right, so if you want to get involved, you want to do something to help those who are in need, you can go to lifelinechild.org right now and find out how to take a stand. And I like that you get kids thinking about two things, the value of life and the value of helping others, because really this is the pathway forward. Herbie, great conversation. Keep doing it. Appreciate what you do. Is there anything else you want to mention before I let you go?
No, Randy, I'm thankful for you, and thank you for your audience. And I just say, if anyone's on social media, you can also find us at at Lifeline Child. So on all of the major social medias, we're at Lifeline Child. And if you're interested in getting your family or your child or even your church engaged in Stand for Orphans, we also have a unique website for that as well, which is standfororphans.org. Again, stand, F-O-R, orphans.org.
Wonderful. Love it. Love it. Love it. Appreciate you. Appreciate your time. And you guys out there watching, appreciate you hitting share, hitting like, follow, subscribe, all those fun things. And come back. We've got more for you right here on Life Today Live. We'll see you again next time.
This is your hour, angry mob. Forever. And the hour of darkness. But enjoy it. Squeeze all the fun you can out of it. This is your hour. This is your hour. Because it's soon going to end. And truth will be on the throne for a change. Sunday is coming.